I can't give in to cynicism, first for metaphysical reasons, secondly for theological reasons. Metaphysically, evil is parasitic upon the good, so good will always be greater. Theologically, the resurrection triumphs over the cross. And so with those two things in mind, it's really incoherent to be cynical.
Welcome back to the Word on Fire show. I'm Brandon Vogt, the host and the senior publishing director at Word on Fire. Cynicism is on the rise, but why are we becoming so cynical? And more importantly, how can we escape its power? That's what we'll be discussing today with Bishop Robert Barron. Bishop, it is always good to see you.
Hey, thanks, Brandon. Good to see you, too.
You just returned back home to Santa Barbara from a trip to New Orleans. You did a couple cool things there. Tell us how that went.
I love that trip. I was there to speak to the abbots of America, so the Benedictine abbots. About 30 of them gathered at St. Joseph's Abbey, which is just north of New Orleans across Lake Pontchartrain. And you can take from the airport, you take the longest bridge in the world. It's the longest bridge over water in the world. It goes right over Lake Pontchartrain. It's like 27 miles or something. So we did that, and then right on the other side is this beautiful abbey, St. Joseph's Abbey. There's also a college seminary there. It's been there for a long time. About 130 kids go there. So I addressed the abbots. I gave them 2 talks on evangelization and the Benedictine life. Great guys. I knew a number of them from travels over the years. And then Saturday night, I met with all the seminarians. We just, not formally, just kind of out and back. It was a kind of a cool evening, and they were smoking cigars, and I just spent some time with them out there. And it was wonderful. These are kids mostly from Florida, from Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, the southern region. And a lot of Word on Fire fans, a lot of people that, were drawn back into the church from, they're in their like around 20. So as kids, they were watching Word on Fire videos. Anyway, it was a great trip. It was fun.
One of the other cool things you did there was visit an artist who created this amazing commissioned portrait of St. Teresa. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I hope we can show it now once we get it in our office in Dallas. It's a young lady, extraordinarily talented. And someone had provided the funding for this, and they commissioned her to do this painting of the little flower holding up the veil of Veronica, basically. It's the face of the crucified Jesus, because she's St. Teresa of the child Jesus, we know that, but also of the Sainte Face, of the holy face. And so it's a beautiful rendering, and she put the North Rose at Notre Dame in the background, because I make reference to that all the time. She has 2 beautiful peacocks in the background, which are evocative of the resurrection, eternal life, but also of Flannery O'Connor. And then a whole wall of roses, because she's going to send her shower of roses. So it was beautifully rendered painting. And weirdly, just by a weird, providence, she lives basically at that abbey. She's about a 5-minute walk from the abbey. So I went over and met her and her husband and her little son and saw the picture, and it was just terrific.
So a big thank you to Natalie Wood. Natalie's a member of the Word on Fire Institute. She commissioned this painting for Word on Fire. And then a big thank you to Blair Barlow, who painted it. It's gorgeous. We'll link to it in this episode, but also on Blair's site, you can order prints of it. So once you see it, if you want a copy, you can order one for yourself.
Beautiful, yeah.
Okay, well, from that good news, let's turn to the bad news of cynicism. I've had lots of people emailing me asking, can Bishop Barron speak to this rise of cynicism, pessimism, negativity, call it what you want. I recently found a good article on Upworthy with this long title, "We are being lured by the siren song of cynicism. We have to choose a different route." And so I thought we could use that article as the springboard and talk through it together. So first of all, here's how they define cynicism. It's an inclination towards pessimism, a lack of faith or hope in people, characterized by a general distrust of other people's motives. And I think, Bishop, we've all seen an increase in this, and I think social media, the internet, political, cultural events, church events, they're all swirling causes of this rise in cynicism. Have you seen that yourself?
Absolutely. It's exacerbated a problem. Look, it's been around as long as human beings have been around. Because, it's like shooting fish in a barrel to see negativity in human affairs. to notice bad motives, to notice bad activity, to notice cruelty and stupidity and violence and hatred. I mean, they're all over the place. And our doctrinal tradition teaches us to expect it because, as our friend Chesterton said, the original sin is the one doctrine for which there's clear empirical evidence. All you have to do is look around the world. But our doctrine teaches us to expect human dysfunction. So if you're looking for it, you're predisposed to see it. Of course, you're going to see it everywhere because it is everywhere. And as Solzhenitsyn said, the line dividing good and evil runs right through every human heart. It's not just out there, like, oh, there's the good people, there's the bad people. It's right here. There's a battle between good and evil. And so if your predisposition is, I'm going to look for the negative, well, I mean, by God, you'll find it in abundance. So it's a question more of our predisposition, I suppose, of what we choose to look for.
We did an episode a while back on the documentary The Social Dilemma, which exposed how these algorithms, these companies work to deliver us very carefully curated content. And the author of this article notes that those algorithms are perhaps in huge part responsible for this rise in cynicism. He says, the bad stuff gets our attention, which prompts people to talk about the bad stuff, which triggers algorithms that push more of the bad stuff, which creates a feedback loop informing us that everything is terrible. Do you attribute a lot of this to the social media?
Yeah, I agree with that principle. And when I saw that movie, right away it resonated with me. It's, the metaphor I use, Brandon, is the car wreck on the side of the road. How annoying it is when, like, even a little minor accident, so that, no one's been hurt or killed, or it's just a minor accident, but it causes this huge backup. So I'm, from the Los Angeles area where the traffic is bad anyway. The slightest little problem, we all got to stop, we all got to look, and that causes the next guy to stop and look. The next guy, and before you know it, there could be a 10-mile backup over some stupid little fender bender on the side of the road. Well, now, multiply that, a fortiori, if you're talking about scandal and what did this person say? And, well, I'll find a famous person who said something I slightly disagree with, but, oh, boy, am I mad about it. I'm going to trumpet that on the internet. Soon you have this enormous backup on the highway of life, right? You have a very, very minor thing, typically, but it's causing this enormous problem. That's what these algorithms do. And they are nefarious. And maybe like most things, Brandon, they began they began to serve something good. Like, hey, okay, that guy's interested in this. Let's give him more of what he's interested in. Okay, but they've been twisted for bad ends, and now they're reinforcing a lot of our very worst tendencies. Why do we like to look at car wrecks by the side of the road? I mean, why are we so attracted to this in the first place? But then the system is making it produces this 10-mile backup.
What strikes me is that, I mean, this, I know this, everyone knows it. When you're in one of those long lines, you think, why can't everybody just drive past it, go without looking? But then when it's your turn, you're like, well, I've waited 45 minutes. I might as well just slow down and see what was going on.
Well, the other thing, it's interesting, though, I like that metaphor because it's like the very fact that this traffic jam has happened means that you are effectively stopped. And so, of course you're going to look. It's like the thing itself compels you to look. And that's what these algorithms do. It's like they compel us to look at things that normally we might say, oh, come on, that's a lot of nonsense. Or, oh, for Pete's sake, that's so exaggerated. But the system itself has conspired to make us pause and look at these things. And it stirs up within us some of our very worst tendencies. Judgmentalism. And, I never would have said that. And, oh, really? Who said that? We need to get over that.
Also seems to me that uniquely today in this age of hyper-connected internet, social media, we're aware of far more bad news and scandal than any other generation before us. Like someone living 200, 300 years ago, they wouldn't know what this or that priest or bishop was doing. They wouldn't know what this or that politician was doing halfway across the world. But we've got all the bad news of the world now instantly available to us.
Yeah, and I suppose it serves us in a way, that we're really plugged in. We really know what's going on. But it also, as you suggest, produces a lot of negativity. There's something lovely about being disconnected, and a lot of people witness to that. You know, if you go on a retreat sometimes, they'll say, I need you to put away your phone. I need you to unplug. And people go through a withdrawal. I had that, I remember some years ago on a Jesuit retreat. And they told us, now put your phone in the drawer of your desk. And maybe the end of the day, check it, in case of an emergency. Well, I went through a withdrawal. I mean, it was really difficult for me not to consult the phone. But then after I got over that, what a liberation. What a liberation. Talk to seminarians who are going through a propedeutic year. So a lot of the dioceses have that now, where you go through a year. And they use the term now of detoxification. You have to detoxify from the weird culture that we're in. And a large part of that is boop, 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 get unplugged, And they experience that as a liberation. They experience that as like, wow, suddenly I'm open to all kinds of other things instead of this little obsessive world. So I think we should find better ways to do that. And I'm always supremely aware of the irony whenever I'm using social media to denounce social media. So do I think it's good? Sure, of course I do. I've been using it for 20-some years, But I'm also very aware of the negative side, and we've just got to be careful how we use it.
I want to ask you one more question about the dangers of cynicism, and then we'll shift to the practical remedy of it. The author of this article says that cynicism seduces us because it's easy. It doesn't actually feel good, but it feels comfortable because it doesn't ask anything from us. Cynicism requires no deep digging, no real reflection, no soul searching. It's the easiest thing in the world to call the world a dumpster fire, to toss up our hands and say, well, everything and everyone stinks, so what's the point? Cynicism is easy.
Yeah, true. That's true, I think. Human beings are complicated. Our motivations are always mixed. And the great literary masters knew that. So read any of the great novelists or playwrights or poets. They always know that, how tremendously complicated human motivation is. If you say, my antennae are simply attuned to negativity, so boop, negativity, oh yeah, that guy's a jerk, oh yeah, that guy's just self-absorbed, oh yeah, that guy's ambitious, that's all you're going to see. What the great poets give us, Shakespeare would come right to mind, Chesterton too, is how tremendously complicated human motivation is. And yes, indeed, there is this negativity, but it's often intertwined. Think here of the weeds and the wheat, right? In Jesus' parable, is they just grow side by side. That's the way it is. And a deep dive will always give you that, right? But it's the superficial. And see, now, why, you might ask, do I focus on the negative? Why not focus on the positive? Well, it's because of original sin again, is when I focus on someone else's negativity, I feel better about myself. So, oh, what a jerk, that guy. What an idiot he is. Oh, what a moral failure he is. How morally bankrupt she is. Well, then I get a rush of ego elevation from that. So it's intellectually cheap, that's true. It's also morally questionable, this move. Where the great poets, and then I'd say the great saints, are sensitive to how richly complex human life is and human motivation is, and will take us in full. They'll take reality in full, and not just this one sort of self-validating negativity.
The author continues, I don't know the author's religious background, but he, I think, correctly identifies the antidote to cynicism as hope. He says hope, on the other hand, requires going beyond our impulsive reactions to headlines and sound bites and to engage with humanity holistically. He says hope, though, is far from some kind of unthinking, Pollyannish, head-in-the-sand idealism, but instead hope is the natural outcome of truly diving into the reality of human existence.
Yes. And let me push it even deeper, because there's a metaphysical principle behind this that's always worth articulating. Namely, that evil is parasitic upon the good. Evil is not existent. That's why our friend Tolkien, when he portrays those, the name, those riders, not the orcs so much, but those riders.
The ring wraiths.
Yeah, is when you take away their cloak, they're nothing. They're a type of non-being, because evil is parasitic upon the good. It's the lack of a good that ought to be there. Now, implication from that: good is always greater than and more metaphysically fundamental than evil. See, and the temptation of the cynic Oh, what are you talking about? I mean, evil is everywhere. It's so pervasive, and there are far more wicked people than good people, and far more sinners than saints. And no, the world is evil. But on this metaphysical principle, you can't say that. Because wherever there's evil, there has to be a greater good. It's like I use the image of a cavity in a tooth. What's evil about that is it's a lack of the good that ought to be there. The tooth is always greater than the cavity. If the cavity totally overwhelms the tooth, you're not talking about a cavity anymore. The tooth is just gone, right? Now you might talk about, oh, well, that's bad because there should be a tooth there. Well, then you've appealed to the greater good of your whole mouth and your head. See, the point I'm making is evil is always less than, parasitic upon the good. And that's why the temptation toward a complete cynicism is metaphysically incoherent. You have to begin and end with the good. Now, it doesn't mean for a second, you're a good dentist. You notice the cavity. Oh, yeah, that's not good. We got to deal with that. All right, fair enough. But don't fall in the trap of saying the whole world's a cavity. It can't be. Remember, Brandon, a couple months ago, we had that dialogue with the young atheist, Alex O'Connor, and he kept, like a lot of atheists, kept insisting on how terrible the world is and, children suffering and all that, and how you could possibly reconcile that with God. And he made, at the very end of our dialogue, a comment like, well, no, you got to begin with this. And I said, no, you don't begin with it. And then our conversation kind of ended right there, but it's a very crucial point. No, you can't metaphysically begin with evil. What does St. Paul say? Where sin abounds, grace abounds the more. Well, that's in sort of moral, spiritual terms, but that principle is a good metaphysical principle. Where evil abounds, and indeed it does, there are cavities all over the place. But where evil abounds, good abounds all the more. And that's not Pollyannish at all. That's metaphysically precise. But we need, I think, maybe especially the churches to keep announcing that message.
Let's turn now to the concluding part of this article. The author proposes 3 practical ways to ignore the pull of cynicism and navigate toward hope instead. And I like how he did it because he has kind of a past, present, and future dimension. So the first recommendation concerning the past, he says, first, we can look to the past to see how far we have actually come. Think of all the ways that humans continue to advance and progress. It's mind-boggling. Look at all that we've been through, all that we've accomplished. We are far more capable than we give ourselves credit for in all areas. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, and of course you can see it at the level of, like material progress and all that. But here, I've been agreeing with Bill Maher more and more. Bill Maher, the comedian and cultural commentator, he's terrible about religion. I used to hate him but he's been right, I think, in recent years about a lot of things. And one thing he mentioned on a recent commentary was what he called the progressive phobia of the left. And what he meant was this almost fear of acknowledging progress. So thinking so much of the woke left today that everything is so terrible, that racism is just systemic and pervasive, and the whole country is, from 1619 to the present day, it's just been bedeviled by it. And Barron's like, give me a break. I mean, the enormous progress in my own lifetime, I'm about Maher's age, I guess he's maybe a little bit older, but the enormous progress on questions of race from, let's say, the 1950s to now, are you kidding? And not to acknowledge that, not to say, no, come on, we've come a long way in a positive direction. So I quite agree with that. The progressive phobia is maybe leading to some of this cynicism.
Here's his second practical recommendation. He says, we can choose the filters by which we view the present. He says, there's also the simple truth that we find what we look for. If we look for what is bad, wrong, unjust in the world, we'll find it. That stuff is there, no question. And some of it definitely needs our attention. Ignoring a problem doesn't make it go away. But focusing on the negative all the time is a choice. And it's a choice that doesn't serve anyone well.
Yeah, quite right. Go back to my example of the teeth. You're a dentist, and all you focus on are the cavities. And every mouth you look into is like, oh my gosh, what a mess, and what bad teeth, and look at this. Yeah, and then you get depressed probably in about 3 days. Or, you're a dentist that's I love the challenge. Hey, that mouthful of cavities, but hey, we can fix all those. And hey, the teeth, they're still kind of in place there. And if I do a bridge here and a root canal there, and I fill this one, I can make this mouth healthy again. Well, that's an attitudinal thing. They're not blind to the evil; they see it very clearly. But they've got a positive attitude, grounded not in a Pollyannish, wish-fulfilling fantasy, but grounded in metaphysics, right? That there's a good mouth here that I can actually restore. So that will change your whole attitude toward evil and toward the work you're doing. I think that applies mutatis mutandis to any situation.
Do you think there's sort of an emergency solution? If you're spiritual director, pastor, if someone comes to you and says, Father, I'm just really overwhelmed by all this bad stuff in the world, bad stuff in the church that I'm seeing online, would you ever just tell them, stop looking at everything altogether? Unplug from the internet, unplug from social media, or is that too extreme of a solution?
No, maybe for a time. If someone's really in a bad shape with it, I might say for a time, get off of it. Let's just like fasting, get off of it. How about for Lent? Lent's coming up. When this thing probably appears, it'll be in Lent already. Maybe give up social media for 40 days. See how you're doing with it. I wouldn't be opposed to that. No, you want to come to the point where you're like that good dentist where you can see the cavities but also see the teeth and how you can contribute. Because that leads to the next thing is where you don't find love, put love, as John of the Cross said. So you're looking around, but there's no love here. All right, well, you put love, and then you'll find love, he says. There's an approach. So you're in social media, and all you see is cynicism and negativity. All right, put something positive in there. You see human relationships around you, and it's all, vituperation and animosity. Well, you put into it love and compassion and nonviolence, and then you make a contribution that way.
Here's the author's third and final recommendation. He says, finally, we can remember that the future is still unwritten. One of the hallmarks of cynicism is the sense that nothing changes, that we're going to be stuck in the same stupidity of our own making forever, but none of us has a crystal ball. We don't know what the future holds and how humanity will change through the inevitable ups and downs on the horizon. We couldn't have predicted that we'd be here now 3 years ago, and we don't know what it's going to look like 3 years from now. What do you think about that advice to look to the future?
Yeah, we're building a cathedral. Here's a weird thing, Brandon. This has been true all my life. When I was a kid, my first job was at this bookstore. And I was a stock boy, we called them in those days. And my job was these boxes would come in, and then there'd be all this disorganized mess. And then my job was to bring it to order, to kind of put everything in its place and bring things where they're supposed to be. And I remember it was a big job. It was a lot of work. But I always liked it. I liked the moment when I would come in and I realized, okay, here's my challenge. It's a big mess back here, but I'm going to put everything where it belongs. I'll tell you the truth, to this day. So when I'm at my house here, and Father Steve is a very good cook, and he'll usually make the dinner, but then my job is to do the dishes. Right? And to this day, I kind of like it. When I come in the kitchen and there's this, a lot of pots and it's a big mess and there's all these plates and everything's dirty. It's like, okay, good. It's a big mess, but now I'm going to set this thing right. I'm going to set it right and put everything where they belong in the dishwasher. I'm going to hand wash certain things. I'm going to put the food away. I'm going to put these pots where they belong. I've always liked that. I kind of respond positively to the challenge of making messy things orderly, right? Well, there's an attitude toward life. As you look around, and it's like a kitchen after a big meal has been prepared. It's kind of a mess, Or back to my dumb example, you're the dentist looking at what a mess of cavities. Okay, but now I'm a dentist that likes to set that mouth right. I like to get everything in the kitchen back in its place. So, all right, where you don't find love, put love, and you'll find love. Do something to bring an order to this messy situation, and that will change your whole attitude toward your life.
Let's close with this. Is there a specifically Christian answer to cynicism? Why should Christians of all people be against cynicism?
Because we believe in a divine comedy, right? So the great story that's been unfolding is, like all good stories, it's a mix of dark and light. Think of any novel you've ever read, or short story, or any epic poem, or they always involve struggle and negativity and all that. But if it's a comedy, it ends positively. Well, we know this great story of creation and history and salvation is a divine comedy. We know that because of the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. And so inspired by that, we say, okay, I want to play a role in this great story. And I can't give in to cynicism, first for metaphysical reasons, secondly for theological reasons. Metaphysically, evil is parasitic upon the good, so good will always be greater. Theologically, the resurrection triumphs over the cross. And so with those two things in mind, it's really incoherent to be cynical. Doesn't mean you're not realistic. All of our great people, from Dante and Aquinas through Chesterton, were well aware of the darkness around them, but they didn't turn into cynics because of it. Rather, they turned into, warriors in the good sense, into soldiers for Christ. They gave their lives to make the world as good as they could make it. So I think that's the Christian answer to it.
Well, it's time now for our question from one of our listeners. If you have one for Bishop Barron, send it in at the website askbishopbarron.com. That's where you can record your question on any device. Today we have one from Daniel, who lives in Ontario. He's got a question about how to evangelize parents if they've left the faith. Here's his question.
Hello, Bishop Barron. My name is Daniel from Ontario, Canada. My question is, do you have any advice or guiding principles on how children, especially young adults, can evangelize their parents who have left the Catholic faith in a spirit of charity and obedience? Thank you, and may God bless your ministry.
Yeah, it's a good question. You probably, Brandon, could answer it better because you're so good at that. But we often think the other way, of parents evangelizing their kids who've fallen away. But it does work the other way, especially with, let's see, boomer era parents, many of whom, have disaffiliated from the church. I guess I maybe apply the same principles. One is by your own witness. If they see you going to church, they see you joyfully living the Catholic life, that's likely to get their attention. They might talk about that with their friends, like, hey, my kid goes to church, and heck, we stopped going, decades ago, but he's finding something really positive here. Secondly, I would say, is let the language of the faith be on your lips rather naturally, not aggressively and not, in a proselytizing way. But, talk about the faith, and then let questions naturally surface. So I think that applies in the other direction, too, with young people. Let questions naturally surface. Like, what is it that bugs you the most about the Catholic faith? Or, why wouldn't you go to church? And then see where that leads. So it's the Jesus on the road to Emmaus principle of, he's walking with people who are walking the wrong way. But hey, what are you talking about as you go on your way? Let me hear what's on your mind. So that sort of gentle accompanying approach, I think, is really helpful. But above all, I would say, live your life faithfully and joyfully. And I bet that would get their attention.
Well, thanks so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time on the Word on Fire show.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I invite you to share it and to subscribe to my YouTube channel.